I remember the moment Nadine's laughter cut through the soft hum of the restaurant like a bell announcing my undoing. The polished mahogany table reflected the glow of the overhead chandelier, casting warm halos around crystal wine glasses and ivory plates. I was seated between Mila and her mother, Gladys, at the head of a long banquet table dressed in ivory linens and delicate rose petals. Bertrand, her father, reclined at the other end with an air of amused superiority, swirling a deep red wine in his glass. Nadine clicked her manicured nails together, eyes dancing with mischief, and announced with theatrical flair, "Oh, brother-in-law. We left our wallet at home, and the cards too." Her voice carried a practiced charm, as though she had rehearsed it in front of a mirror. A ripple of laughter rolled through the family. Gladys's mouth opened in a hearty chuckle that shook the crystals on her necklace. Bertrand's laughter boomed, and he nearly choked on his sip of wine. From the corner of my eye, I saw the waiter approach, step lightly, and place the bill face up. Nigerian Naruto 0000, neatly centered on the table. The number gleamed under the lights, bold and uncompromising. I felt an odd stillness settle in my chest, like the calm before a storm when all birds have flown. My fingers twitched at my side, restless. I could sense every pair of eyes shifting toward me, expectantly, eager for the family financier to take center stage. Mila's hand brushed mine, her fingers warm against my sleeve. I wanted to squeeze her hand back, to reassure her that everything was okay, but I felt detached, as though I were watching someone else's life unfold. Nadine's smirk widened. She knew exactly what she was doing. Each of her parents, eyes shining, waited for my response. There was a time when I would have slipped my card from my wallet without hesitation, offered a gracious laugh, raised my glass in self-deprecating apology. I would have done it for peace. Peace in Mila's family, peace in her smile, peace in the unspoken bond that I thought meant acceptance. But something inside me had shifted, an ember of cold certainty that this charade had gone on long enough. I had sat through joke after joke, each one chiseling away at my pride until I was an ATM on two legs. I had grown silent and dutiful, working late nights to replenish an account that never filled, chasing their approval through the ding of payment confirmations. Tonight, the ember flared into flame. I leaned forward, the suede of my suit brushing against the edge of the table. The room hushed, the quartet's soft strings paused mid-note, the waiter's poised hand froze an inch above the tablecloth. I felt the weight of their stares, heavy and expectant, but I felt lighter than I had in months, lighter than I had ever felt. My voice emerged calm, measured, unfamiliar even to me. Not tonight. Silence crashed down like a wave. Nadine's jaw dipped, her teasing grin replaced by shock. Gladys gasped, covering her mouth with the back of her hand. Bertrand's eyebrows rose so high I wondered if they'd never descend. Even Mila's eyes widened, hurt and confusion warring in her gaze. The waiter blinked once, then twice, and stood motionless, the bill still on the table. "Excuse me." Gladys's voice trembled, as though she were waking from a dream. She glanced at Milton, no, at me, then back at the bill. "What do you mean? Not tonight?" I settled back in my chair, clasped my hands on the table, and let the gentle tinkling of silverware and the rustle of shifting guests return to the room. "I mean that I won't be covering this." My tone held no apology, only resolve. A ripple of disbelief pulsed through the diners seated at nearby tables. I could almost feel their thoughts. Who does he think he is? Mila's hand found mine again, this time with desperation. "Derek," she began softly, lips trembling. Her voice faltered, and she looked to her parents. Gladys's sharp gaze shifted from me to her daughter, a slash of disappointment. Bertrand cleared his throat, attempting to recapture his composure. "Oh, come now," he said, voice thick with forced amusement. "You know how things work." He reached across the table as though to coax me back into the fold. But I saw it all so clearly now. The way they had leaned on me for every expense, the way gratitude had become as scarce as the cards they left at home, the way my own family dinners had once felt warm and right. I had chased a dream of belonging here, of feeling enough, and discovered that their welcome was conditional on my bank balance, on my willingness to say yes. And in that realization, a fierce resolve ignited. "I do," I said, voice steady. "I know exactly how things work." I paused, watching the ripples of shock spread through their faces. "But I'm done playing my role." Mila gasped, tears pooling in the corners of her eyes. "Derek, please." I shook my head, voice softening only for her. "Please what?" I asked, leaning closer so only she could hear. "Please tell me what I did wrong by deciding for once that this isn't mine to pay." She swallowed hard, the silence pressing in. Nadine blinked rapidly, her smirk gone, replaced by something like fear. Gladys's hand trembled as she lifted her wine glass, but she didn't drink. Bertrand shifted in his seat, discomfort etched into his posture. I drew in a breath, letting the tension in my shoulders ease. "I'm not your perpetual wallet," I said, more to myself than to them. "I'm your brother-in-law. I married into this family because I love Mila, not because I wanted a never-ending tap." A tremor of quiet swept the room. The quartet resumed playing, the notes low and somber. The waiter, carefully avoiding eye contact, slipped away with the bill. In that moment, I realized I felt a strange peace, as though stepping off a treadmill that had been running since the day I met them. Mila reached out, fingertips brushing my hand. Her eyes glistened with tears. "We can talk about this," she whispered. I squeezed her hand gently. "Yes," I agreed. "We will." And as the laughter faded and the echoes of their expectations dissolved, I felt something stirring within me, a spark of self-respect I hadn't known I'd lost, now blazing back to life. Tonight, I had refused to pay the bill. More importantly, I had begun the journey of reclaiming myself. I had believed in fairy tales, the kind wrapped in satin ribbons and presented on silver platters, until the day I realized I'd married into nothing but smoke and mirrors. From the moment Mila introduced me to her family, I was seduced by their effortless grace. They moved through their lives with a polished harmony, as though Sunday dinners unfolded like elegant symphonies. Gladys would glide from the kitchen to the dining table, carrying platters of steaming jollof rice and perfectly spiced suya, while Bertrand greeted each guest with a firm handshake and a warm embrace. Nadine and her younger brother, Felix, exchanged knowing smiles behind their parents' backs, their eyes sparkling with the shared secret of belonging to a clan, so unified it felt otherworldly. I stood at the periphery of this scene, awestruck, and let their projected dream wash over me, promising that here, finally, I would find a home. In those early months, I channeled every ounce of ambition into fitting in. I made sure my shirts were crisp, my shoes shined, my anecdotes amusing. I remembered birthdays and anniversaries without prompting, sent thoughtful gifts for graduations and promotions. When Bertrand hinted that his study lamp had a flickering bulb he couldn't replace, I surprised him with a professionally installed lighting system. When Gladys mentioned her favorite silk scarf had faded, I tracked down an identical replacement from Milan. Each gesture earned me a ripple of approval, a nod from Gladys, a genuine smile from Mila, an approving "well done" from Bertrand. For the first time in my life, I felt seen. I believed this was love, this network of appreciation fed by compliments and gentle laughter. But beneath the surface, the currents ran colder. Subtle cracks spread like hairline fractures across a once pristine vase. It started innocently enough. Casual remarks about my income bracket, uttered half-jokingly at family gatherings. Bertrand would laugh heartily, slapping me on the back, and then slip in a comment about how someone in my position should be able to cover everyone's tab. At first, I laughed too, swept up in the banter and relieved to be part of the inside joke. But each time the words passed between us, I felt a sting, a reminder that acceptance here was conditional. Gladys, with her sweet voice and calculating gaze, began to critique my attire, complimenting my brother-in-law's tailored suits while whispering about how she hoped I would step up to the level of her daughter's class. Mila would brush these comments aside as mere traditional expectations, telling me not to take offense. I wanted to trust her, and so I swallowed the discomfort and nodded, promising myself I would work harder to match their standards. I told myself this was all part of the dream I'd signed up for, a family that valued success and generosity above all. I convinced myself that paying for Nadine's extravagant hair treatments, Felix's impromptu weekend getaways, and Bertrand's golf club membership renewals was simply an extension of familial love. When Gladys mentioned that she and Bertrand didn't want to burden me, I felt a surge of pride, as though I had become the pillar holding the entire family aloft. I brushed away the tiny voice in my head that wondered why no one ever offered to reimburse me, why no one ever paused to ask how this constant outflow of funds affected my own dreams. The turning point came on a wet Saturday morning, when I accompanied Mila to her grandmother's 95th birthday celebration. The hall gleamed with white drapes and floral arrangements, and relatives I had never met lined up to greet us with kisses on the cheek. I watched as Mila's cousins exchanged stories of her childhood triumphs, her graduation honors, and her impeccable taste in friends. They all turned to me as I entered, their smiles wide, their expectations unspoken but clear. This was my moment to shine, to prove that I was worthy of this illustrious clan. I stepped forward, offering to handle the bill at the catering stand, but the family matriarch, Aunt Beatrice, raised a fragile hand and whispered, "We insisted on the budget being handled by Derek. He's our shining rose." Applause broke out. I felt a rush of exhilaration, followed by a pang of unease. I felt like a trophy, decorative and admired, rather than a partner in love. That night, after the party, I lay in bed beside Mila, my head heavy with unshed doubts. "Do you ever feel like they see me as a bank account?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. Mila turned onto her side and ran a hand through my hair. "They love you," she murmured. "They're just traditional. They give a lot, so they expect a lot. It's nothing personal." I wanted to believe her. I wanted her words to shatter my anxieties. But the gentle kindness in her tone felt like a salve applied to a wound that kept widening. As weeks turned into months, the demands grew in frequency and boldness. The casual dinners morphed into lavish soirees with opulent menus, couture dresses, and imported champagnes. Each invitation came with the unspoken caveat that I would cover the costs. Nadine's wedding dress fitting required me to spring for an entire entourage's travel expenses. Felix's overseas internship meant bankrolling an expensive apartment in London. Bertrand decided to restore a vintage car, an enterprise that left me signing check after check to overseas parts dealers. I found myself canceling vacations I'd long dreamed of, postponing home repairs, and charging late fees on bills to funnel funds to Mila's family. I went from feeling honored to feeling hollow. My bank account bled out, while my spirit wilted beneath the weight of obligation. I remember the exact moment the facade cracked, a crisp Monday morning when I realized I had forgotten to pay my own rent because I'd wired 500,000 Nigerian nairas for Nadine's brand new designer handbag. I stared at the rejection notice on my phone, heart pounding. I tried to call the bank's helpline, but my hand shook so fiercely I dropped the phone. In that moment, the dream shattered. I saw the truth mirrored in the empty space where my savings used to be. I was not living with a loving family. I was trapped in a gilded cage whose bars were forged from my own generosity. That afternoon, I walked to the office instead of driving, the weight of my debit cards heavy in my pocket. I felt stripped bare, exposed. A wave of anger and desperation coursed through me. Anger at myself for letting it happen, desperation for a way out. I opened my laptop and stared at my dwindling accounts. For the first time, I realized that the warmth I once craved had been a mirage, a performance stage for my applause. When I got home, Mila greeted me with a hug. She looked radiant in her patterned dress, oblivious to the clash of emotions simmering beneath my skin. I took her by the shoulders, and she saw the wild panic in my eyes. "Mila," I said quietly, "we need to talk." Her smile faltered. She led me to the living room, where the afternoon sun slanted through the curtains, dust motes dancing in the light. I laid the bank statements on the coffee table, receipts, transfers, loan approvals, each one a testament to my unraveling. Her eyes scanned the numbers, her lips parting in shock. "Derek," she whispered, touching the papers like they were shards of glass. I had no idea. I shook my head, voice raw. "You never did," I said. "You never asked." The hurt in her gaze stung deeper than any family slight. "I thought you were happy," she breathed. And in that moment, I understood that the dream I had married into was never real. It was built on my sacrifices and sustained by my silence. I took a deep breath, summoning the resolve I had mustered at that first dinner. "I can't keep doing this," I said. "Not for them. Not for us." Mila's tears fell like rain. "Please," she begged. "This is our family." I reached for her hand, my voice steady. "This is my life," I said. "And I need to reclaim it." As I watched her shoulders shake, I knew that the journey ahead would test us both. But for the first time, I felt a flicker of hope, a belief that the life I reclaimed would be built on honesty, not obligation. That I could belong somewhere because of who I was, not because of what I paid. And in that fragile ember of possibility, I found the strength to begin again. I never intended to become the family's default cashier, but somewhere along the way I lost sight of the line between generosity and exploitation. It started innocently, an extra 50,000 Nigerian nairas here to cover Nadine's phone bill, a 100,000 Nigerian nairas loan for Felix's robot project at university. But before I could blink, I was the only one reaching for his credit card. I remember the first time I paid for Nadine's overseas flight without a second thought. She'd called from her bedroom, panic in her voice. "Derek," she'd said, "they're boarding in 2 hours, and my card got declined. Can you cover me just this once?" I pictured her stranded at the airport, alone and helpless. I told her it was done before she finished the sentence. I wired her the money, felt a brief rush of satisfaction, and then nothing. No thanks, no inquiry into my week, no acknowledgement of the tight budget I was juggling. Just the soft click of her phone shutting off, leaving me with a hollow ache where pride used to be. Mila never asked directly, but she never stopped it either. Sometimes, late at night, I would catch her scrolling through my bank statements on her phone, her brow furrowed in concern. "It's just one thing," she'd murmur when I confronted her, brushing a hand through her hair. "You're doing so well, Derek. Let me handle this." I wanted to believe her, wanted to trust her instincts that this was merely a family expectation, ingrained like a ritual of devotion. But each time I paid, the weight in my chest grew heavier, until I felt as if I were sinking in an ocean of debts that weren't mine to bear. I recall the Sunday I realized just how deep I'd fallen. We were at Gladys and Bertrand's sprawling country home for a family barbecue. The skies were bright, the air scented with grilled chicken and spiced plantains. Laughter bubbled around picnic tables as children chased each other through the grass. Nadine sidled up to me near the barbecue pit, her voice low. "Babe," she said, "I forgot my wallet again. Can you spot me for the catering deposit? They need it now, or they'll cancel the order." I frowned and checked my watch, knowing I had a meeting to prepare for later. But when her eyes flickered with something I couldn't name, an expectation, a challenge, I agreed. I handed over my card and watched as the caterer tapped it into the reader. Nadine's smile lit up like sunshine. "You're the best," she cooed. And then she disappeared into the crowd, leaving me with a flutter of pride tainted by a bristling sense of being used. The realization sank in during my drive home. I had missed a critical pitch at work because I was busy footing the bill for someone else's family celebration. My phone buzzed incessantly with missed calls and text notifications. My boss's name lit up the screen, but I let it ring. I felt hollow, as though my identity had been reduced to a wallet with arms and legs. When I reached our apartment, I found Mila on the sofa, her eyes red from crying. She looked up at me, face pale beneath the soft glow of the lamp. "What happened?" she asked, voice trembling. She didn't mean my missed call. She meant the way I screwed my eyes shut when I parked the car. The way I let the engine idle instead of shutting it off. The way I seemed distant. I closed the car door softly and joined her, fingers brushing hers. "I'm sorry," I said, swallowing hard. Her expression mirrored the exhaustion in my bones. "I'm stretched too thin," I confessed. "Work, family, it's too much." She studied me, sadness pooling in her eyes. "Maybe I shouldn't have pushed you so hard to help them," she said softly. "I thought it was what you wanted, but maybe I was wrong." Her words were a balm and a blade. I knew then that my struggle wasn't hers to solve, but I yearned for her solidarity. "I want us to have our own life," I whispered. Her hand squeezed mine, but I could tell she felt torn between her loyalty to family and her love for me. From that moment, I vowed to set boundaries, to reclaim ownership of my finances and my time. I started by quietly adjusting my online banking alerts, setting strict limits on transfers. The next family dinner, when Gladys reached for my card before I'd even tasted my soup, I paused. Her hand hovered midair, and the flicker of surprise in her eyes gave me courage. "Actually," I said softly, meeting her gaze, "I'd like to split this one. Mila and I have some bills we need to take care of." The air crackled with tension. Bertrand cleared his throat. Nadine's lips pressed into a thin line. But no one argued. I felt a tremor of relief ripple through me. Yet old habits die hard. The guilt gnawed at me every time I left the restaurant without footing the bill. I half expected Mila to scold me or cry, but she didn't. Instead, she slipped her hand into mine and gave my fingers a gentle squeeze. "Thank you," she whispered. Her gratitude was a rare gift. I clutched it, determined to believe it was worth the awkward silence that followed. Establishing boundaries wasn't a single act but a series of small rebellions. I declined to cover Nadine's spa day, choosing instead to wash the dishes at home so Mila could rest. I told Felix he'd need to pay for his own internship housing. He grumbled but eventually accepted the loan terms I insisted he agree to in writing. I reminded Gladys that she could ask Bertrand for help with her website redesign, and that I was happy to assist free of charge, but only with her permission and a clear timeline. Each refusal felt like a pinch, a reminder that relationships can be strained by money. But each time I asserted myself, I felt my sense of self return a little more. Over time, Mila and I forged a new understanding. We sat down one evening, laptops open, and reviewed our budget together. We listed our joint goals, saving for a home down payment, planning a honeymoon trip we'd postponed, rebuilding our emergency fund. We agreed that family obligations would come from a designated line item, capped at a reasonable amount. Anything beyond that would require discussion and consent. As we talked, I realized how much I had missed this partnership, the collaboration that drew us together in the first place. I had carried our dreams alone, as though they were my own to bear. Now we shared them again. The change rippled through my interactions with Mila's family. When the next invitation arrived, this time for Aunt Beatrice's festive dinner, I RSVP'd yes and indicated I would bring a homemade dessert. Gladys, ever gracious, accepted. At the dinner, I arrived with a tray of small, sweet pastries, baked with care. Nadine sipped her wine, her expression unreadable, but she didn't ask for my card. Bertrand congratulated me on the dessert, genuinely savoring the flavors. And when the bill arrived, I paid my share, sliding my card across the table with a quiet nod. No laughter followed, no teasing remarks, only polite conversation that centered on family stories and shared memories, not on my bank account. In reclaiming my autonomy, I discovered something I'd long forgotten, the joy of giving without expectation. When I helped Gladys learn a new email platform, she beamed and offered me a heartfelt thank you tea. When I lent Felix my old repair tools to fix his bike, he looked at me with newfound respect. The tennis racket I bought for Mila's birthday was met with genuine surprise and gratitude, untainted by familial entitlement. These gestures reminded me why I had chosen this family in the first place. Love had brought me here, and love deserved reciprocity, not exploitation. Tonight, as I close my laptop and prepare for bed, I feel a quiet contentment settle over me. The journey hasn't been easy. Setting boundaries required courage I didn't know I possessed. But with each step, I've regained pieces of myself. My confidence, my sense of worth, my right to decide how I spend my money. I've watched Mila stand with me, not against me, and I've seen the subtle shift in her family's expectations. The tension has eased. Appreciation is replacing entitlement. I still love them, even as I protect myself. And I know that true responsibility for a family doesn't mean emptying my own pockets but sharing my life, and laughter, and support, in moments both grand and small. In doing so, I've found a balance that honors us all, Mila, me, and the once fantastical family I married into. It's not the dream I thought I was buying. It's something far more precious, the dream of respect, equity, and love without conditions. Gladys's voice was velvet, sweet as the aroma of vanilla that lingered in her kitchen after she baked her famous butter cookies. Yet beneath that sweetness lurked a razor-sharp edge, a blade she wielded with practiced precision. I first noticed it one evening at the Winslow holiday luncheon. I had arrived early to help set the table, stacking plates and polishing silverware until they gleamed. Gladys hovered nearby, her pearls resting against the soft fabric of her blouse, her hair arranged in perfect waves that caught the light just so. She complimented my tie. "It suits you so well, Derek," so refined, and placed a gentle hand on my arm. But as soon as I relaxed, she leaned closer, voice low, and honeyed. "Of course, at your salary level, you can afford something nicer." Her smile warmed the room, but her words lodged in my chest like a splinter. I looked down at the tie I'd chosen for its simplicity and affordability, feeling its thin fabric suddenly inadequate. I forced a laugh and nodded, adjusting the tie with a trembling hand. The laughter around us rippled at my unease, as though Gladys's comment were no more than a punchline. Yet I felt the sting of judgment and the weight of expectation. In that moment, I understood that Gladys's kindness was conditional. I lavished when I conformed, withheld when I did not. Every compliment carried with it an unspoken caveat: meet the standard, or risk her disapproval. Later that night, as I washed dishes in the sink of their pristine kitchen, I held her words in my mind like a mantra: at your salary level. I wondered who had the courage to defy those conditions, to tell her that worth could not be measured in naira. Bertrand's approach was more boisterous, yet no less barbed. He was a large man with a hearty laugh that shook his shoulders and a booming voice that turned heads. He had an easy way of patting me on the back, leaving me reeling from the impact of his hand as much as his words. "You know, Derek," he would say, eyes twinkling, "you're practically one of us now," practically meaning you pay like us. But we don't pay back. The laughter that followed each time felt like a collective exhale, a release of tension that came at my expense. I tried to laugh along, raising my glass in feigned amusement, but inside I felt my pride slip away with every thud of his palm. The worst was Nadine, whose smirk was a weapon she wielded without mercy. She perched on the edge of the family's grand leather sofa, legs crossed just so, her designer heel glinting in the afternoon light. "I'm sure Derek won't mind," she'd drawl, ordering the most extravagant items on the menu during family gatherings. She'd scrawl down dishes I couldn't even pronounce, while her phone teemed with endless group chats and selfies she took to document her indulgence. She was the family's queen of extravagance, and I was her benevolent bank. Her eyes gleamed with triumphant entitlement whenever the waiter approached, expecting me to slide my card across the white linen tablecloth. I remember the night she ordered a vintage wine from France, over £500,000, it being delivered with fanfare, and she giggled as the waiter turned to me, hand outstretched. "Oh, don't worry, Derek, this one's on you," she said, tossing her hair over her shoulder. I swallowed hard, hands clammy, and nodded, watching her sip the expensive wine like it was water, as though my consent were a given. Mila, caught between the currents, remained silent, her laughter soft, her apologies whispered. When I confronted her once about the mounting bills, her voice trembled as she replied, "They're just traditional, Derek. You know how we do things." I wanted to believe her, to trust that this was all part of a cultural ritual of give and take. But as the debts piled up, credit card statements strewn across our kitchen counter, I realized that this tradition was more akin to exploitation. It was a performance in which I was expected to play my role without question, or risk being called ungrateful or selfish. Over time, the manipulations wore me down, like waves eroding a rock until nothing remained but sand. Each smile from Gladys came with a price. Each pat from Bertrand came with an expectation. Each request from Nadine chipped away at my autonomy. I became hypervigilant, checking my account balance before every family event, calculating whether I could afford another dinner, another gift, another favor. I dreaded the invitations but feared the wrath of refusal even more. My sleep became restless, filled with dreams of overdraft notices and unspoken resentments. I realized I was no longer a husband. I was a conduit for their desires, my identity reduced to a stream of payments. One night, as I lay awake beside Mila, I took a deep breath and whispered into the darkness, "I cannot do this anymore." The confession trembled in my throat. Mila stirred, her silhouette soft in the moonlight. She reached for my hand, and in her eyes, I saw the flicker of understanding and perhaps regret. She hadn't known the depth of my sacrifice, nor the pain of their jests. "Show me," she said, voice gentle but firm. "Show me every statement, every invoice. I need to see." At her words, I felt a crack open inside me, a passage for truth. We spent the rest of the night poring over our finances, guided by the harsh clarity of numbers and the raw ache of betrayal. When dawn light spilled through the curtains, I felt a resolve I had not known before. The manipulations beneath the laughter no longer held sway over me. I understood that setting boundaries was not selfish. It was necessary. Gratitude, not expectation, was the currency of healthy relationships. And love, genuine and reciprocal, could only flourish where respect was mutual. As the sun rose over our apartment, I finally let myself believe that I could break free from their demands, and that in doing so, I would reclaim not only my finances, but my dignity and our marriage. I buried the weight of their expectations beneath a smile, convinced that my sacrifices were the currency of love. But each time I said yes, a piece of myself slipped away, lost to the endless cycle of giving and never receiving. The silence that followed their requests was deeper than any spoken rebuke. It was a chasm where gratitude ought to live, a hollow space that echoed my own diminishing worth. I remember the first time I noticed it, how subtly it crept up on me like a shadow at dusk. It was a quiet Wednesday evening, and I sat at my desk, eyes red from reviewing client proposals late into the night. My phone buzzed with a message from Gladys. "Could you help me with the catering bill for next week's luncheon? I'm short 150,000 Nigerian nairas this month. Let me know ASAP, dear." I stared at the text long after the screen went dark, the numbers blurred in my vision. I typed a brief reply, "Sure, send me the invoice," and slipped the phone into my pocket, resigned to another withdrawal I had already budgeted into my dwindling savings. That same week, I missed an important check-in with my mentor, a man whose guidance had helped me land the promotion that fueled my in-law family's expectations in the first place. My phone rang with his name on the screen, but I let it go unanswered, telling myself I could call back later. After covering Gladys's lunch, transferring money for Bertrand's car parts, and buying a new designer bag for Nadine's birthday, I stared at the clock and realized there was no later. My mentor's voicemail crackled with polite concern. "Derek, hope everything's okay. Give me a call when you can." My gut nodded. I had traded my own future for their immediate comfort, and the price was more than financial. It was the erosion of my identity, the gradual exodus of my self-respect. I didn't speak up at first. Instead, I buried the silence under work, diving into spreadsheets and late-night conference calls, grasping at busyness like a life raft. I told Mila I was under pressure, that deadlines were tight, that everything would normalize soon. She nodded, sliding her hand across my back, and offered quiet understanding. But I sensed the strain in her eyes, the way she hugged me a little too stiffly, as though afraid to press me for details. And so the debt of silence grew between us, stretching wider with each unspoken worry. One evening, I stopped at the neighborhood store to pick up milk. The attendant recognized me and remarked cheerfully, "You've been busy lately. Haven't seen you at the basketball court in weeks." I forced a laugh and excused myself, grabbing the carton and turning to leave. As I walked out into the cool night air, I realized I couldn't remember the last time I had played a full game without checking my phone, without counting my remaining balance in my head. I missed the camaraderie, the way my teammates would cheer when I sank a basket, the sense of belonging that had nothing to do with money. I missed being Derek, the friend, the mentor, the man who had once lived with hope and purpose beyond the next family request. That night, I lay beside Mila, staring at the ceiling where dust motes danced in the lamplight. The silence between us felt heavy, laden with unasked questions. I turned to her, voice quiet but resolute. "We need to talk about them." She faced me, concerned. "Which ones?" she asked. I exhaled, steeling myself. "Your family. Their expenses. Our future." Mila's eyes glossed with tears. "I know," she whispered. "I've been meaning to bring it up, but I was afraid." Afraid, her single word resonated with me. I realized we had both been silent, each carrying our own guilt and fear. I reached for her hand, warmth traveling between us. "I can't keep doing this," I said. She nodded, her tears spilling over. "I don't want you to," she said softly. The next morning, we sat at our kitchen table with laptops open and financial statements spread before us. The early sunlight crept through the blinds, illuminating the columns of numbers that had come to define my life. We paused at each line. Nigerian Naira 500,000, Nadine's birthday dress. 300,000 Nigerian Nairas. Felix's tuition top-up. 150,000 Nigerian Nairas. Gladys's luncheon. Each entry was a reminder of my relentless giving and their unspoken entitlement. I watched Mila's shoulders shake with regret as she scrolled through the list. When she closed the laptop, her gaze met mine, mournful and determined. "This can't go on," she said. We crafted a plan together, the roadmap out of the dead of silence. We established a joint budget and allocated a modest family gift fund, an amount we could comfortably afford, no strings attached. We agreed that any request beyond that fund would require open discussion, mutual consent, and, if necessary, a polite refusal. It felt revolutionary, as though we were pioneers charting unknown territory. Armed with our plan, I wrote an email to Gladys and Bertrand. My fingers trembled over the keyboard as I composed the message, clinical and respectful, yet firm in its boundaries. I explained that as much as I loved them, I needed to prioritize our shared future, that our joint finances would now be managed transparently, that further requests would need to be discussed in advance. I pressed send, and the ping of the notification seemed to echo in an empty room. That evening, we attended a small family gathering at Nadine's apartment, an intimate affair with close relatives and Mila's childhood friends. I could feel the tension as I joined conversations, the subtle shift in eyes that watched me, the unasked question hanging in the air, "Will he pay?" When the host discreetly passed around an envelope for contributions toward catering, I reached for my own, placing in it only the amount we'd allocated in our family gift fund. Nadine's eyes flicked to mine, curious. I caught her gaze and gave a small, encouraging nod. She looked away, lips pressed together. Later, when she discovered the envelope contained less than she expected, she confronted me in private, voice low and accusatory. "What's wrong with you? Did you suddenly run out of money?" I met her gaze calmly. "We have a budget," I said. Her nostrils flared in anger, but I held firm. "I'm still happy to help within our means," I added, voice gentle but unwavering. "But I can't cover everything." The silence that followed was heavy with her shock. No tears, no tantrum. Just the dawning realization that her access to my finances was no longer unlimited. The fallout rippled through the family circle. Gladys and Bertrand reached out the next day, their voices cool and measured, asking to meet. We sat in their living room, and for the first time, the conversation felt balanced. They listened as we explained our reasoning, our joint goals, our desire to maintain a healthy relationship built on respect rather than obligation. I expected resistance, but instead, I saw in their eyes a grudging respect, a recognition that perhaps they had taken me for granted. Over the following weeks, I noticed subtle changes. Nadine asked for smaller favors, phrasing requests with polite qualifiers. She sent a thank you note when I helped her register for a professional seminar. Bertrand invited me to join his golf group as a peer, rather than treating me as an ATM with privileges. Gladys called just to chat, asking about my day rather than my credit limit. Within my marriage, too, I felt the silence dissolve. Mila and I reclaimed movie nights, spontaneous weekend getaways, and morning walks in the park, moments we had sacrificed on the altar of their expectations. My mentor's call went unmissed, our project proposals flourished, and I felt my old drive returning. I rediscovered the joy of spending time with friends, sharing laughter instead of debt. I even returned to the basketball court, sinking shots under the floodlights, each basket a testament to my returned freedom. The debt of silence had been the heaviest burden of all, a weight born of unspoken obligations and unexpressed grievances. Laying it down allowed me to breathe again, to live authentically, and to love fully. In that vulnerable act of truth, I found not division but healing, not conflict but connection. And as I look ahead, I am certain that boundaries are not barriers but bridges, gateways to relationships sustained by mutual respect, gratitude, and the unwavering knowledge that love, at its best, is never owed, but given freely. The invitation arrived like a crown jewel in a velvet box, gleaming with expectations and wrapped in gilded paper. I held it in my hands, tracing the curlicues of the gold lettering, Gladys and Bertrand's 35th wedding anniversary. Beneath, the details unfurled in elegant script. An evening gala at the Grand Victoria Hotel, black tie attire required, cocktail hour at 6, dinner at 7:30. A cascade of names followed, the entire Winslow clan, extended relatives, a handful of family friends, and me, Derek, the ever-faithful husband, the provider, the one they would look to for the final bill. I stared at the card, my pulse drumming in my ears, and felt a familiar knot tighten in my chest. 35 years, glimpses of white gowns, vibrant bouquets, and the clink of crystal toast floated through my mind, mingling with the memory of the countless dinners and vacations I had funded. I saw Bertrand's hearty laugh when he unveiled his classic car, the first gift they'd given each other, and Gladys's teary smile as she placed her hand in his. Their love story, I realized, was monumental. Their milestone deserved celebration. But the mounting cost, venue rental, decor, catering, live band, loomed like a specter over my savings. That evening, after a silent dinner at our apartment, I laid the invitation on the table between Mila and me. I closed my eyes, swallowing the lump in my throat. I used to be, I admitted, exhaling slowly. I thought providing for your family was my way of showing love. I uncapped my pen and set it beside the invitation, then reached beneath the table for my laptop. The soft hum of its fan filled the room as I opened a spreadsheet titled Anniversary Budget. Mila watched me, uncertainty in her eyes. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Planning," I answered, fingers flying over the keys. I entered columns for venue cost, catering, flowers, entertainment, seating, and contingencies. Each line item came with a figure so painfully familiar, figures I had researched when last helping them plan their daughter's engagement party. The total hovered around 3.2 million Nigerian nairas. My breath caught. This wasn't a small gesture. It was a wholesale appropriation of our nest egg. I looked at Mila and felt the tremor of guilt. "We can't cover this," I said. "Not without jeopardizing everything we're trying to build. Our home fund, our emergency savings, our plans to travel." Her shoulders slumped. "I know," she whispered. "I just thought." I reached across the table, covering her hand with mine. "Let's talk to them," I said. Together. The next afternoon, we drove to Gladys and Bertrand's house. The driveway curved through manicured hedges, the familiar scent of magnolia blossoms greeting us at the front door. I carried the invitation and our amended budget printout in my hand, feeling the weight of both. Before I could summon courage, The door opened and Gladys enveloped us in her warm, perfumed embrace. Her eyes sparkled as she invited us inside, and Bertrand appeared behind her, beaming. Inside, the house shimmered with memories, family photos in ornate frames lining the staircase, heirloom vases filled with fresh lilies, and the faint undertone of aged wood from their antique parlor furniture. Gladys led us to the sitting room, where tea awaited on a silver tray. I could have poured her a cup, handed it to her with a smile, but my heart pounded too fiercely. We settled into high-backed chairs, the invitation resting on the coffee table between us. Gladys gasped in delight. "Isn't it grand?" she exclaimed. Her voice held a hint of triumph, as though she'd cast a spell with those embossed letters. "Everything we dreamed of." I nodded, my throat tight. "It's beautiful," I agreed. Then, drawing a deep breath, I slid our printed budget across the table. The teacups clinked against their saucers as they paused mid-sip, eyes widening at the columns of figures. Bertrand reached for the paper, adjusting his glasses. He scanned the sheet, brow furrowing. "Where did these numbers come from?" he demanded. Mila spoke up, her voice steady. "We compiled them," she said softly. "We checked costs at the hotel. Rentals, catering, entertainment. It adds up to 3.2 million Nigerian nairas. More than we can comfortably manage." Gladys's face fell, a crease forming between her brows. "But we always said we'd want you to handle it," she protested, voice wavering between hurt and surprise. I rose slowly, stepping closer. "I know," I said gently, "and I've been honored to help in the past. But we have our own goals, saving for a house, building an emergency fund, planning our future trip together. Covering this event in full would deplete those funds." Silence settled like dust in the grand room. Gladys set her teacup down with a trembling hand. "I hadn't realized," she murmured. "We never considered your future." Her words struck me deeply. Looking at her tear-filled eyes, I felt the ache of a son not quite belonging, of a provider expected to give without pause. And yet across from me, Mila's hand squeezed mine, a reminder that we faced this together. Bertrand cleared his throat and placed the paper on the coffee table. "We obviously misread the situation," he said, voice soft. "We apologize for putting you in a bind." His gaze shifted to me. "We're proud of what you and Mila are building. We want you to continue without worry." Gladys rose and enveloped me in an embrace, her pearls clasping at my shoulders. "Thank you for telling us," she whispered. "We love you." In that moment, I felt the tension soften, like ice cracking under the first touch of spring sun. We spent the next hour discussing scaled-back options, a smaller banquet room, simpler decor, a junior band instead of a full orchestra. Each compromise shaved hundreds of thousands off the event cost. We agreed to hire a local caterer, serve a 2-course meal instead of 3, and forego imported linens. And instead of a champagne tower, they'd raise glasses of their favorite sparkling wine. By the time we left, the anniversary plan felt collaborative rather than burdensome. Gladys and Bertrand hugged us both at the door, gratitude shining in their eyes. The invitation we carried home was no longer gilded with assumption but rewritten in trust and respect. Driving back, Mila rested her head on my shoulder, and I slid my arm around her. "Thank you," she murmured. I smiled down at her, a surge of love filling my chest. "Thank you for standing with me," I replied. As I folded the revised invitation and placed it on our kitchen counter, I realized that saying no had not fractured our family, it had redefined it. The anniversary would still be beautiful, but more importantly, it would be shared willingly, with everyone contributing and celebrating together. In setting boundaries, I had honored not just my own future, but the true meaning of family, unity built on mutual respect and understanding. And with that, I felt an unexpected excitement for the evening ahead, a celebration not of debts owed, but of love renewed. The night air was cool as I stepped out of the car, the humid weight of Lagos summer tempered by a faint breeze that carried the distant hum of traffic. I smoothed the front of my charcoal suit, the fabric whispering against my fingertips, and adjusted the cufflinks I had chosen for this moment. Simple silver, unadorned, a testament to my resolve. Mila walked beside me, elegance personified in her deep emerald gown, her hand brushing mine for reassurance. We approached the grand entrance of La Belle Époque, the upscale restaurant chosen by Gladys for its luxury and discretion. A gilded marquee glowed above polished glass doors, promising an evening of opulence. Inside, a string quartet's soft timbre drifted through the air, mingling with the low murmur of well-heeled guests exchanging pleasantries. I paused just inside the threshold, letting the atmosphere settle over me. The scent of roses in silver vases, the glint of crystal glasses on lacquered tables, the hush of laughter that carried both familiarity and expectation. The maitre d' greeted us with a practiced bow, his polished shoes whispering on the marble floor. He showed us to the long table draped in ivory linen, its length enough to seat 80 guests. Candles flickered in golden candelabras, casting a warm glow on the faces of family members already seated. Bertrand at the head, commanding attention with his broad shoulders and confident smile. Gladys to his right, radiant in pearls, her eyes bright as she welcomed us with a sweep of her hand. Nadine draped across her chair with languid poise, and Felix leaning in to share a mischievous whisper with his cousin. We took our seats, and I felt the familiar tightening in my chest. The unspoken knowledge that, at the end of the evening, my card would be presented, and I would be expected to pay for their lavish feast. My stomach knotted with the memory of previous dinners, each one ending in quiet frustration and mounting resentment, yet always tempered by my desire to maintain peace. But tonight was different. Tonight, I would draw my line in the sand. I straightened in my chair and offered a polite smile to the neighbor at my left, conscious of the eyes watching. As the first course arrived, delicate bowls of pumpkin soup garnished with toasted coconut and a drizzle of cream, the quartet played a soft adagio, and the room settled into an intimate hush. Conversation flowed, polite inquiries about work, compliments on attire, toasts to health and happiness. Nadine, perched across from me, cast a sidelong glance, her lips curved in amusement. True to form, she lifted her chin and announced in a tone that carried to every corner of the hall, "Oh, brother-in-law, we left our wallet at home, and our cards too." Her voice danced between jest and challenge, as if daring me to respond as I always had. With a grin and my card. A ripple of laughter spread through the table. Gladys's pearly laugh chimed above, and Bertrand leaned back, swirling his wine glass. I felt my pulse quicken. The bill would arrive soon. Nigerian Naira 200,000 for this first seating, and more for the wine, the dessert, the service charge. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, the familiar resentment stirring in my chest. But I took a breath, steadying myself in the presence of my own resolve. I dipped my spoon into the velvety soup, savoring its warmth, and addressed the table, voice calm enough to fool casual listeners. "It's unfortunate," I said, laying down my spoon and letting the silence stretch. The quartet's music trailed off, and the guests turned their attention toward me, forks pausing midair. Mila's gaze met mine, astonishment flickering in her eyes. Nadine's smirk faltered as she waited for my predictable acquiescence. I took another breath and added, because tonight, I didn't bring my wallet either. A quiet gasp rippled through the room. The waiter, with impeccable timing, approached and placed the bill, Nigerian Naira 200,000, directly in front of me. He paused, eyes flicking from me to the family, awaiting instruction. The candle flames danced across the bill's stark digits. Silence settled heavy as humid air, the string quartet's melody forgotten. The waiter's outstretched hand hovered near the paper, as though he feared upsetting some fragile balance. I leaned forward, my reflection mirroring in the polished tabletop, and placed a sleek black folder next to the bill. The sharp snap of its opening reverberated in the sudden hush. Inside lay tabbed sections of receipts, statements, and invoices. 18 months of transactions laid bare. Clinic bills for Gladys, tuition fees for Felix, lavish spa visits for Nadine, the countless dinners, weekend retreats, even the wedding dress alterations. Every expense meticulously catalogued in neat columns, each footprint an imprint of my generosity and their unspoken entitlement. I turned to Gladys first, catching her trembling hand as she reached for her wine glass. "Mom," I said gently, voice low but carrying across the table, "this is everything I've covered on your behalf for the last year and a half." I let my gaze sweep over the file tabs. Trips, repairs, clothing, gifts, tuition, even that sunset cruise you took last December. My tone remained even, devoid of accusation, but laden with the weight of truth. Nadine's eyes widened at the sight of the vintage wine receipt, Nigerian Naira 600,000 for a single bottle. She looked away quickly, lips peculiarly thin. Bertrand shifted in his seat, clearing his throat before speaking. "Derek, this is," he began, voice wavering between astonishment and defensiveness. I raised a hand to halt him. Please, I said, voice soft but unyielding, hear me out. Then, placing my finger on a highlighted line, I continued, Nigerian Naira 4.6 million. The number landed with a quiet thud. That's the total, I said. Nearly 5 million Naira. The room held its breath. Plates rested untouched, wine glasses paused mid-toast, and the quartet slipped into uneasy dissonance. Gladys's hand trembled as she pressed it to her chest. I had no idea, she whispered, eyes glistening. Derek, why didn't you say something? Her voice cracked beneath the weight of remorse. I met her gaze, compassion and firmness mingling in my expression. Because I loved you, I said quietly. I wanted to support you. But love isn't a blank check. Expectation without gratitude erodes the spirit. And I found myself empty, not seen for the man I am, but valued only for what I could give. I paused, letting my words settle like dust in the candlelight. Mila reached across and placed her hand over mine. We've been silent, she said, voice firm. It's time we speak. I looked at her, relief mingling with pride, then turned back to the family. Consider tonight your final withdrawal, I said, sliding the folder closed. The soft click resonated in the stillness. This bank is closing. Indefinitely. A tremor passed through the table. Bertrand stared at the bill, then at me. So, what happens now? He asked, voice small. I placed the black folder beside the bill and rose slowly to my feet, every eye upon me. Now, I said, voice steady, we decide what kind of family we want to be. One built on mutual respect and shared contributions, or one sustained by unspoken debts and silent resentment. I gestured toward the bill. As for this, I suggest we split it tonight, equally. A murmur rose at the suggestion, some gasps, some cautious agreements. Gladys blinked back tears and nodded. Yes, she said softly. Let's do that. A collective exhale rippled through the guests as the waiter stepped forward once more. This time, Nadine reached for her purse without hesitation, extracting enough cash to cover her portion. Felix counted out his share. Bertrand and Gladys conferred and paid theirs together. And when the last Naira exchanged hands, the tension in the room seemed to break like a storm passing. The quartet found a resolute chord, and the music resumed, warmer this time, as though celebrating a new beginning rather than masking an old injustice. I sank back into my seat, head spinning with relief and vulnerability. Mila's hand found mine beneath the table, and she smiled, a small, triumphant curve of her lips that said more than words could. Conversation resumed, gentler now, focusing on memories and hopes rather than expectations. Later, as dessert plates were cleared and the final notes of Auld Lang Syne floated from the quartet, I realized something profound. Tonight was not just a dinner scene, it was a turning point. When we finally left the restaurant, the night sky was a velvet canvas speckled with stars. I slipped my arm around Mila and inhaled the cool air, tasting freedom. We did it, she whispered, leaning into me. I nodded, feeling the weight lift from my shoulders. Yes, I said. We did. In that moment, I understood that boundaries set with love do not build walls but gates, opening pathways to relationships rooted in respect, honesty, and genuine appreciation. And as we walked into the waiting car, I felt the promise of a future where I would be cherished for who I am, and not for what I could pay. The morning after the dinner scene, the house felt too large, too quiet. I woke to an unfamiliar calm, the weight of months of unspoken debts lifted from my chest. Sunlight filtered through the curtains in our living room, painting golden stripes across the rug where I had fallen asleep in my suit jacket. I sat up, remembering the folder, the bill, the silent gasps around the table. My heart pounded with relief and an undercurrent of fear. Would the fallout be worse than I'd imagined? I stood and walked to the kitchen, the scrape of my shoes on the hardwood sounding loud in the stillness. Mila was already there, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. She handed me one, her eyes bright but guarded. How do you feel? She asked softly. I breathed in the rich aroma, feeling grounded by her presence. Freer than I have in years, I admitted, resting my palm against the counter. But I know we've set off a series of ripples. I'm bracing for the fallout. She reached out, squeezing my hand. They'll come around, she said, voice steady with conviction. We gave them respect by speaking honestly. Now they'll learn to meet us halfway. I wanted to believe her, and I clung to that hope as we sipped our coffee in shared silence. Later that morning, my phone buzzed with a message from Nadine. I hesitated before opening it, bracing myself for hostility or perhaps a cutting remark. The message read, "Thank you for being honest last night. I realize how much I took for granted. Dinner is on me next time. My chest warmed with surprise. I typed back a simple thank you and felt a flicker of connection I hadn't expected. By midday, Gladys called. Her voice trembled with emotion. I've been thinking about what you said, she told me. You're right. I never considered how I've leaned on you. Can we meet for lunch? My treat. I offered to split it, but she insisted. I heard in her voice a blend of apology and determination to rebuild what had been strained. I agreed, feeling the first stirrings of genuine family reciprocity. That afternoon, I met them at a small bistro in the city. Gladys greeted me with a warm hug. Bertrand handed me a business card for his favorite tailor, promising a commission on a new suit as a token of their appreciation. As we talked over salad and grilled fish, the conversation shifted from finances to memories. Old vacations, family milestones, the story of how they met at that very decade-old restaurant. Laughter replaced unease, and I realized that sharing burden had opened the door to sharing joy. Returning home, I found Felix in the living room, textbooks strewn across the coffee table. He looked up at me, eyes hopeful yet uncertain. I wanted to apologize, he said. I didn't realize how much you were covering for my school expenses. I'm working extra shifts now to help cover my next semester. My throat tightened with pride. You don't have to, I said, voice soft. He shook his head. I do. I want to. His resolve mirrored mine from earlier days, when I had first launched my career, eager to prove myself. I nodded, feeling the warm ache of connection that gratitude can foster. That evening, Mila and I took a walk along the waterfront. The evening breeze carried the scent of salt and distant grills, and the city lights shimmered on the water's surface. I slipped my hand into hers, and she rested her head on my shoulder. Today felt like the start of something new, she said. Like we're finally on equal footing with your family and with each other. I pressed my lips to her temple and nodded. I've never been more certain, I replied. Back in our apartment, I settled at my desk and reached for the folder from the previous night. My eyes traced the tab sections, but this time they felt like a relic of a past life, an account of what had been rather than what would be. I closed the folder and slid it into the bottom drawer, out of view. It belonged to the chapters we had left behind. Before bed, I sent a group message to Gladys, Bertrand, Nadine, and Felix. Thank you for today. I cherish our new beginning. Within minutes, replies came flooding in. Hearts, thanks, promises of reciprocal gestures. I leaned back against the headboard and exhaled, feeling the tension melt away. In the quiet darkness, I reflected on how far I'd come. From an eager provider blinded by love to a partner who understood that generosity without boundaries can become its own prison. Tonight, I slept without the gnawing fear of silent requests, secure in the knowledge that I had reclaimed my life, and in doing so, had strengthened the bonds that truly mattered. The fallout came like a sudden downpour after weeks of still air. I remember the moment vividly. I was at my desk when my phone vibrated with a message from Mila, her words brief and taut. They're here. My heart pounded as I stepped into the living room, where Gladys and Bertrand stood at the doorway, their expressions a curious mix of calm. They carried a small basket of pastries and a heartfelt apology in their voices. Gladys's eyes shimmered with unshed tears as she said, We've spent these past days really talking to one another. We owe you so much more than silence. Bertrand nodded, his posture uncharacteristically subdued. We want to show you, not just tell you, he added. And with that, they unloaded an assortment of homemade jams, fresh fruit, even a handwritten note from Nadine. Thank you for setting me free. Their presence filled the apartment with warmth I hadn't realized I'd missed. Over coffee, we spoke openly about boundaries, mutual respect, and how their expectations had created a chasm between us. They asked questions I'd never dared to voice. How did it feel to be taken for granted? What did you lose in the process? And as I answered, my words finally unshackled me from months of resentment and quiet shame. I saw in their faces genuine remorse, not the defensive politeness of earlier days, and it anchored me in a hopeful possibility that families can learn and grow when given the chance. A week later, I initiated the next step of our unspoken agreement. I invited everyone, Mila's family and my closest friends, to a casual Sunday barbecue in our modest backyard. No frills, no expectations, just simple grilled fish, jollof rice, and laughter echoing under the afternoon sun. Nadine arrived with a platter of her new favorite recipe. Bertrand manned the grill, flipping fish with surprising skill. Gladys sat beside me, recounting stories of our honeymoon in whispers meant only for my ears. Felix challenged my friends to a game of badminton, cheering wildly when I scored a winning point. In those moments, I felt the barrier between provider and partner dissolve, replaced by genuine camaraderie. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting gold and rose hues across the sky, I stood at the edge of our yard and inhaled deeply. The sound of distant chatter, the soft clink of glasses, the contented sighs of children chasing fireflies, all of it reminded me why I had fought to reclaim my life. Not out of spite, but out of self-respect and love. Later, Mila slipped her hand into mine and leaned her head against my shoulder. "Look at us," she whispered. "We did this together." I smiled, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Together," I agreed. In that shared silence, more powerful than any apology, I realized we had built something more enduring than any lavish celebration, a family united by honesty, gratitude, and the freedom to simply be ourselves. After 6 months of silence and space, I unlocked the door to our new flat and stepped inside, the scent of fresh paint and newly bought furniture greeting me like a promise. The living room was modest, warm lighting, a cozy sofa, a single framed photo of Mila and me from our wedding day. I kicked off my shoes and sank into the cushions, breathing deeply, savoring the quiet hum of independence. No past debts lingered here. This was my sanctuary. That evening, I wandered into the small kitchen, flicked on a solitary pendant light, and brewed a single cup of coffee. As the steam curled upward, I felt a smile tug at my lips. Across the table lay my worn travel journal, its pages blank, waiting. I hadn't touched it since before the wedding fiasco, when dreams of solo adventures had been sidelined by family demands. Now, I pulled it toward me, uncapped my pen, and wrote the date at the top of the page, January 15th, 2026. Below, I pinned my first entry. Home is where I choose to be, on my terms. Over the next hours, I mapped out a one-man trip to the Niger Delta, a hiking excursion in Obudu Cattle Ranch, and a weekend getaway to Betagree's historic sites. Each dream felt tangible again, lit by the spark of self-rediscovery. I paused to admire the neat row of sneakers lined by the door, each pair a testament to a moment reclaimed, the running shoes for morning jogs, the hiking boots for mountain trails, the canvas slip-ons for leisurely strolls. Mila returned that night with a single red rose and a beaming grin. She set the flower in a simple vase and slid onto the sofa beside me. "I miss this," she said softly, tracing my journal's open page. "You." I gathered her in my arms, heart full. In that small flat, with nothing more than our love and a cup of coffee, I had finally reclaimed my life, and it was priceless.